time for the attackers. Now in every attacking siege meta, there's always at least one hard breacher. And in this instance, it would be Thermite. Now the reason Thermite is at the very top and not Hibana or Maverick is because Thermite has universal use compared to the other two hard breachers. Hibana obviously is stronger at opening hatches since she has 3 of them, which means 3 hatches, and Thermite only has 2. But in most cases, you'd bring a Thermite and Hibana at the same time if you needed them anyway. A good example is Vault on Bank, where you absolutely need Hibana to open up the hatches, which is required to take the Vault bomb site very easily. Now, other than that, Hibana has limited use compared to Thermite. That being said, she is still quite useful, so she'd probably be around here, maybe. As for Maverick, he was strong on release. Not right away, because it took some time for players to figure out how to use him, but once they did, he was very strong for a while. And then a couple of patches ago, they nerfed him by reducing the speed at which he gets his gun out after he puts away his blowtorch. Ever since then, he hasn't been as strong as he quite used to be, since it's more dangerous now to make peek holes with him, and the time it takes for you to put your gun away, it can make it very easy for a defender to quick peek you, or even just hold the angle while you're opening up the peek holes. And because it takes you so goddamn long to take out your gun, the defender can get his shots off first before you can. That being said, it is a common strat in organized play to ban Hibana on sites where she's extremely useful or when there's a lot of hatches. In those cases, you'd bring a Maverick instead. So let's get all the hard breaches out of the way, and I'm going to put him in C tier, simply because I think he's a little bit too nerfed now and therefore too situational. Hibana can essentially do the same job that Maverick can, but obviously Maverick's immune to gadget denial, more so than these two. Now in most cases, just a hard breacher alone simply isn't enough to breach anything that's reinforced. Most of the time in organized play, the enemy team will at least have either a bandit or Kaid or both. And in those situations, you 100% need an operator that can destroy these entry denial gadgets. The most obvious ones that come to mind, obviously, are Thatcher and Twitch. Now, Twitch does have arguably the best assault rifle in the game, even in its nerfed state on Phantom's site. However, I believe Thatcher is simply the more flexible operator, because the EMP nades are universally useful. They're also super reliable in the sense that the only thing that can destroy them are Jaeger's ADS turrets. But in most cases, a Thatcher player will know where said ADS turrets are anyway, and you'd attempt to obviously not waste your EMP grenades. Also, Thatcher's probably the only operator that can reliably destroy a Kaid charge on a hatch, which gives him the edge over Twitch, since for Twitch, it's all about, can you get your drone to destroy all the entry denial gadgets, or even at least one, without it getting spotted. Twitch can pop mirrors, which is super important, since mirror is a staple on defense nowadays. But I do believe Thatcher wins out when it comes to entry denial countering. Yeah, there really isn't anyone else on the attacking side that belongs in S tier. We don't really have any super high game-changing operators, or at least not in an overpowered state in the current attacker meta. Obviously, if this was the old Ying and Glaz execute meta, both Glaz and Ying would be up there, but we're not in that meta anymore, and both those operators are quite nerfed. I'll get into that more later. And Lion obviously is still globally banned, so we can't even play that operator, so. Now, as with hard breaching, soft breaching is as important as hard breaching when it's available. Vertical play in Siege has historically been very, very strong when done right for both the defenders and attackers. In this case, you definitely want an operator that has a gadget specifically designed for destroying wood. Theoretically, any operator can do it, anyone that has breach charges, but it's still a better choice to bring at least one operator that can do that. And obviously, we have Buck and Sledge as Siege's two premier soft breaches. In my opinion, Buck slightly edges out Sledge simply because Buck is a little bit more flexible in the sense that he can do vertical play from below a site, whereas Sledge and every other operator that has breach charges cannot. Now, Sledge does have a slight advantage over Buck when it comes to destroying gadgets, since the hammer will destroy most deployable gadgets in the game. The obvious examples are deployable shields, maestro cams, and castle barricades. That being said, Buck can easily do the exact same thing using his own frag grenades. So the choice is really on the player personally and what he needs for the bomb site. So obviously, if you need to do vertical play from the floor below, then you'd take Buck in every situation. But if you didn't need to do that, then Sledge can be a really good alternative. Next up are the ranged soft breaches. Obviously, the two operators for that are Ashe and Zofia. Now, in my opinion, Zofia is probably the better of the two choices now, simply because Ashe has lost an ACOG on her R4C. Yes, you can run an ACOG on her G36, but that being said, it is a pretty mediocre gun compared to everyone else's assault rifle in the game. And having an ACOG on the attacker side is very important, since you want to be abusing the long angles or taking long range fights when it is advantageous to you, simply because many of the defending roster do not have ACOGs, so it's very important for attackers to be able to take long range fights when necessary using an ACOG. And because Ashe can't do that with her R4C, Zofia is the slightly better choice, simply because while her gun is pretty good, it wasn't an R4C level though, but she does have extra concussion nades to make up for that. Also, she has that stupid withstand mechanic that no one else in the game has, which honestly shouldn't be in the game, but whatever, that's another thing. Next up, we have Capitao. Now, the reason why Capitao is a strong operator in my opinion is because his smoke bolts are one of the attacking side's reliable ways to get smokes down when you need them for an execute. Yes, it does help that he's a 3-speed, and it does help that he has two guns that both hit for 48 damage per shot, even with a ridiculously slow fire rate. But that doesn't really matter when you as an operator counter one of the strongest operators on defense since the game has started. Because he counters Jaeger pretty much directly, his power is therefore tied to Jaeger in the meta. So if Jaeger was to suddenly become a shit tier operator for whatever reason, then you'd see less of Capitao and therefore he would drop. But for the time being, he's an A tier simply because of the smoke bolts. Other uses that he has are the fire bolts, which recently got reworked. They may not do as much damage as they used to, but they actually work in their intended design, and that's for flushing out attackers from corners or tight rooms, or preventing rotations by putting a firebolt there. And the AoE on that thing is fucking massive now at its maximum range. So yeah, I don't have anything else to say. He's just a really strong operator. Next up, we have IQ. It should be fairly obvious at this stage of the game why she's a strong operator. It's simply because she counters operators that have hard to detect gadgets. The obvious examples being Echo, Valkyrie, and Legion. On top of that, she has a solid gun. It hits very hard, even though it has, once again, a low fire rate. And she is a 3-speed with a small hitbox compared to everyone else, with her hitbox being comparable to Ashe. Not much else to say. That's pretty much the only reason why she's played. On a map like Consulate, it's pretty normal to have an IQ on every attacking round. Next up we have Jackal. Now, how most attacking rounds are played these days is that the attacking team will try to clear out all the lurkers before an execute on the bomb site is made. And having a Jackal help you do that will make doing that far faster and far more easily. Because if at any point when you enter the building as a Jackal, you spot footprints and you track someone, their position is basically known to your whole team for, 20 to 25 seconds every 3 to 4 seconds or 5 seconds, which is just the most oppressive thing as a lurker. And even if you don't kill them, at worst they will run back to site, and therefore you've technically cleared out the lurker. He's just not dead. He doesn't really have a counter as well. The most obvious one is obviously Cav, because she doesn't make footprints while she's in silent step, nor can she be tracked while she's in silent step. But the problem is Cav is just a shit operator in organized 5v5 play, because she brings 0 utility, and the chances of getting an interrogation off are probably, 1 in 20? You'd rather just bring someone with utility or even Vigil. So I don't really have much else to say. Jackal's equipment. The smoke grenades are extremely strong, obviously. They're the best attacking gadget you could ask for. And his AR hits like a fucking truck while being a laser beam and having a decently fast fire rate at the same time. It's my personal favorite AR in the game, but that's just me. Also, his SMG is a solid secondary primary choice if you wanted to. Thing has a 50 round mag and has nearly no recoil and is a laser. So it's pretty much a headshot machine. Next up we have Nomad. Reason why she's up here is simply because her gadget is just broken. Period. There is no real counterplay to her gadget whatsoever. I mean, yes, they recently added a sound cue so that you can hear the trap when you're near it, but that doesn't really help, because you know the trap's there, but you still can't walk through, because if you trigger the trap, not only does it make you lose control of your character and you get knocked down, but the entire attacking team can fucking hear that shit because it's so loud. So even if you trigger it and get past unscathed, the attacking team now knows that someone is flanking or at a position where the trap was triggered. So this operator just shuts down aggressive flanks and lurking play from the defender's side, which makes her super strong already. And just the fact that she has no counterplay probably makes her an A tier operator. Her weaponry is quite mediocre when you compare it to everyone else on the attacking team, but that doesn't really matter when well-placed Nomad charges can effectively shut down any sort of flank or roaming play by the defenders. I should also note that there really isn't any sort of order to the operators in a single tier list. So for example here, I have Haban at the very top of A tier, but I didn't actually rank her at the top of A tier. I just put her there because, you know, I'm too lazy to rearrange it and to figure out in depth why X operator is better than X operator in the same tier list. It honestly doesn't even matter that much when I put them in a tier list. They're of relative same strength, and because you need different operators for different situations, it's not as bread and butter as a fighting game tier list, for example, where certain fighter might be better than another fighter for sure, even in the same tier list. So, yeah. I think I might move Maverick up to B tier. I don't think he's C tier worthy. He's definitely still strong, just not as good as he once was. Alright, let's start B tier with Monty. Now Monty is a character that's very, very situationally useful. But when he is useful, he's super strong. He especially excels at pure 1v1 since dealing with his extended shield is just pure bullshit. He can just constantly look at you with the extended shield and you'll never be able to kill him. And since he can't be stunned while being in extended shield form, it just makes it all the more annoying. Obviously, the most obvious way to deal with a Monty is teamwork, but usually that's also countered by teamwork on his own behalf from his teammates. I don't really have anything else to say. He's just a walking meat shield that looks at you or moves at you to put pressure. And obviously there are strats designed around him that are super strong, and in those situations he is super strong. But in other situations, he's barely useful at all, which is why he's down in B tier. In post plants though, he is super strong. Like an attacking team with Monty will pretty much never lose, simply because Monty is just unkillable without any sort of help or from teammates. Also, he can just stand in a doorway or a rotation hole to just block you, which is really annoying. Next is Ashe. Now, as I said before, Ashe has lost a lot of her power by no longer having an ACOG on her R4C. That being said, she is still useful as a ranged hard breacher, and she is still good as a fragging operator because she still has all the tools that you would want as a player that simply wants to kill shit. Obviously, the ranged grenade launcher for the shooting breaching grenades is still strong. You use that to destroy gadgets such as maestro cams and such, or she's still a 3-speed, and her R4C is still quite good if you play at that close quarters range. But other than that, she is an inferior version to Zofia, which is why she's in B tier. She's not shit, obviously. She's still quite a strong operator, just not good enough to be an A tier anymore. And not weak enough to be worse than B tier. That's definitely for sure. Next up, we have Twitch. Now, everyone pretty much agrees that she has the best assault rifle in the game. The FAMAS fires ridiculously fast for an assault rifle, almost 1000 RPM, while doing 37 damage per bullet. And on top of all that, the gun is manageable recoil-wise. However, that being said, her drones, while silent, or not 100% silent anymore, but still pretty quiet, and while useful, you only really use them for one purpose, and that is popping mirrors open. I guess now she'd be a good counter to maestro cams, since if you ever find yourself near one, you can simply shoot at it with a taser and then shoot at the new open socket that it makes. Other than that, I don't really see her utility being as useful as other operators above her in the tier list, which is why she's down in B. When you look at it that way, if the only reason she's even in B tier is because her drones can pop mirrors, which, you know, that can be game changing when it happens, but it's quite rare because you'd have to deal with defenders shooting your drones or mute jammers that are placed quite well, or even now getting your drone hacked, which you probably don't want to ever happen by a Mozzie. So yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. The only reason she's in B tier is because of her gun. Like, some players who are pure fragging players will probably just play her for the F2. Alright, let's start off C tier with Dokkaebi. Definitely a pretty nerfed operator ever since she got nerfs to her phone call. On top of that, ever since the recoil change, she really hasn't had a solid weapon for close to mid-range fights. Before they changed the recoil, the SMG-12 would be a pretty solid secondary SMG. It fired ridiculously fast and did a lot of damage, so it was strong enough to be more powerful than some other operators' primaries, to be honest. But now that that gun is super uncontrollable and she only has a DMR as a primary to rely on, yeah, I don't know. And she does have smoke grenades. That is a saving grace. But that being said, You mainly only played Dokkaebi for the phone calls, and especially when Lion was still able to be played in organized 5v5 games. She was strong in combination with Lion, but definitely without Lion to back her up, she's definitely not as strong as she once was because of the nerfs. That might change if Lion gets released from his global ban status, but we'll just have to wait and see. For the time being, she's a C-tier operator for sure. Alright, next up, I'm going to put Glaz here. Now, Glaz for sure is going to be a weaker character in Phantom Sight because of his rework, with him no longer being able to see through his thermal scope if he's moving. A hard nerf no matter how you look at it, because he's losing functionality in his gadget, which is the thermal scope. And already before then, he was already seeing less play overall anyway, because Maestro is a top tier pick on defense, and that operator hard counters you as Glaz because a Maestro can always see your position through the smoke grenade. So yeah, I don't really have anything else too much to say. A shadow of his former self for sure, and with these nerfs, it's not gonna help at all. The character did deserve the nerfs, obviously, because him being able to see through smoke while moving and potentially playing the entry fragger role was complete bullshit, but yeah, I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest. Next up, Ying. Same boat as Glaz, really. Ever since her rework, she has lost a lot of her power in that before she was reworked, the only real way you could get an effective use of Ying was if you threw all of your Candelas into a room where you think there are multiple anchors or players, and you'd run in, hope you don't run into any traps, and hope that they weren't looking at your Candela the moment you ran in. Because normally with Candelas, you want to be pushing in as your Candelas are exploding, not after they have exploded, just in case they have successfully avoided your flashes. Just the fact that you can't spam them anymore alone makes her C tier. I honestly would have put her in B tier if you could still spam them, but ever since the mini rework, she's definitely lost some power. Also, Warden is going to be an effective counter against her, even though I personally think Warden is pretty shit operator overall. It doesn't change the fact that he is a direct counter to any sort of operator with smokes or flashing ability. So that's why Ying's down here, and that's where she's going to be unless she gets some changes. Also, yeah, Jaeger is an operator in defense that hard counters Ying, and Jaeger gets played pretty much every defense round, which is another reason why she's weak. Alright, next up we have Blitz. Now, Blitz is interesting in that he's actually still very effective at what he does, and that's running down or rushing down a character that is isolated or out of position, and then getting an easy kill with your flash shield. But the reason why he's definitely not a strong operator is because it's actually very easy to kill him nowadays with all the tools that you have at your disposal on defense, and from the general amount of power that he's lost over time with nerfs. The most obvious one being that recently his shield is now on a 7-second cooldown compared to 2 seconds, which is a little bit ridiculous. I reckon if they were going to change that, they should have changed it to 5 seconds maximum. But before that, there was him losing a bit of speed when he first got changed to being a 2-speed 2 armor. Him losing hip fire accuracy. It was almost tripled, I believe, while he was moving as Blitz. Yeah, other than that, just general tools that hamper his effectiveness, like Lesion Mines, Barbed Wire, being concussed by Ella Mines or Echo Drones, getting flanked, or having just not checking your corners correctly. There was even the shield bug, where your shield position relative to the enemy was desynced. That was quite annoying and get you killed sometimes. But yeah, he also doesn't bring any utility. When you compare him to his counterpart on attack, Monty, Monty is essentially a far superior version of Blitz, He's just not as fast. And he's more safe to add to that too. So yeah, I don't have any more opinions. I personally think Blitz is quite weak overall. Obviously still good at what he does once again, but yeah, just not strong. Next is Blackbeard. Now, Blackbeard's in C tier for the exact same reason Blitz is in C tier, in the sense that he's actually still good at what he does, and that is play window angles or play very tight angles where only your head is exposed. And in those situations, his gadget will be useful in that it saves you from headshots, which is one of Siege's most broken mechanics. And the reason why this character is not allowed to be anywhere near strong is because of his shield. Other than that, he's just generally a weak character overall when he's not abusing his gadget. Has weak guns, is very slow when his shield is out, has the slowest ADS time in the entire game, doesn't really have useful attacking gadgets. He has breach charges and flashbangs. I mean, breach charges are useful, yeah, but breach charges can be obtained on other operators, so it's not really an advantage. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. He's super situational, but in those instances where you need to hold down certain angles or you need to play from the windows, he will be good. It's just, can you make him more useful than any other operator in the tiers above? Alright, onto the worst characters of the game. Let's start off with Finka. What can I say? Her gadget is pretty much useless in organized play. It gives you a 20 health boost when you use it, it's kind of negligible. In most cases it will save you from dying from one more bullet, but I mean, you die so fast in this game that kind of doesn't even really matter. Also, like, the extra HP, who cares when most of the kills you're getting are headshots anyway, right? You can move faster through barbed wire, but why do you need to do that? We can just destroy it with any sort of explosives to begin with. Like, you even come with frag grenades on Finka, so what's the point of that? You're also more resistant to Ella's stun, but Ella isn't even played that often. And to top off that, her boost gets directly countered by Echo's concussion and Legion's mines. I understand Legion's mines countering her, but the Echo stun effect countering her just kind of doesn't make sense. There's a little bit of inconsistency there. I mean, I get that there is a difference between Echo and Ella's stun, but I mean, it would make the operator better if there was a little bit more consistency there, and it would really hammer her down as the operator for countering stun effects, because you're being souped up on drugs. Her weaponry isn't that good. It's kind of dog shit, to be honest, especially her assault rifle, the spear, which is really, really bad. It has a low fire rate and doesn't have the damage to compensate for it. The only saving grace is that it's a laser beam, and if you combine it with Adrenaline Surge, it's definitely a headshot machine, but it's just not a good gun for those instances where you don't get a headshot. The LMG, on the other hand, is decent. It hits quite hard, and while it has a low fire rate, she does have 100 round size mag with it. And if you use the LMG with the Adrenaline Surge, it suddenly becomes a laser beam. That being said, the LMG itself isn't enough to compensate for her lack of utility. So yeah, don't play Finka. She's really, really bad. Alright, next up is Fuse. Where to start? Probably the biggest disadvantage of this character is the fact that he's 3 armor and 1 speed. So already he's at a disadvantage because it's far more difficult being a slow and hulky character on attack than it is on defense, because you are the attacking team. You're the one that has to go to the defenders and make plays, whereas defenders, if they really wanted to, could just sit in their ass all day and hold angles and shit. He does have a good assault rifle. It's probably one of the best in the game, if it weren't for the fact that it isn't a laser and it actually does have substantial recoil. What else? So, his gadget, the cluster charge, it's not really useful at all. It's very situational. For starters, you can't even place the gadget on doors or windows because, well, placing anything on a doorway that's reinforced is just a death sentence because the enemy can always see your legs. So that's out of the equation. Placing it on windows is quite risky as Fuse because if there is a defender nearby playing close to the window and they hear that, they can easily either start shooting through the window and at worst you will be, at best you will be tagged, but at worst you will immediately die. So once again, that's not really a good way to use him. So the only other option you have is to use the cluster charge into a room from the second floor above, which can be good if you can actually get to that stage. Most times, defenders nowadays, they, instead of holding only the bomb site floor, they hold the floor above the bomb site because they don't want attackers to get the vertical play advantage on them, because most of the time in defense, if the attackers manage to get vertical play advantage on you, you've probably already lost, especially if the attackers haven't suffered any losses. So in that instance, he can be good if you can get cluster charges into the actual site, but on top of all of this, in order to get actual use out of his cluster charges, you have to get kills with it. And it's actually very rare that you will get kills with the cluster charge if you can even make it to the point where you're getting cluster charge on the ground and shooting it into the bomb site from the second floor. So in those situations, you'd honestly rather just pick a different operator that actually has utility that can help you take the second floor rather than just, you know, why would you bring an operator that has a gadget that's only useful once you have vertical control when you can bring an operator that will help you gain vertical control to begin with, you know, such as soft breaches such as Sledge and Buck, for example. Or you could even bring different operators with breach charges, even though Fuse has breach charges of himself. So yeah, I don't know. He's pretty bad, but I can see him being good if he was 2 speed 2 armor. If he was 2 speed 2 armor, he might be C tier. He might be decent, because at least you could run him as a fragging operator. But as it stands, he's definitely one of the worst operators in the game. Fuse, however, isn't the worst operator in the game. That title actually belongs to fucking Gridlock. Now, the best way I can describe Gridlock is Scuffed Nomad. She's literally in every single possible way worse. First of all, Gridlock has 3 armor and 1 speed, which is, she's already at a disadvantage compared to not just Nomad, but literally every single other operator in the game. Second of all, her weapons are actually worse than Nomad's in my opinion, and Nomad herself doesn't even have that great of a weaponry, but somehow Gridlock's weapons are fucking worse. Thirdly, Nomad's trap gadget is completely superior to Gridlock's. Gridlock's takes 10 seconds to actually fully deploy, and while it's deploying, it's making this really fucking annoying click sound that you can't stop hearing, and actually muffles some defender footsteps sometimes, so you can't hear shit. Also, if the defenders trigger Gridlock's trap, all they do is take a bit of damage and move a little bit slower, whereas if they trigger Nomad's traps, they actually lose control of the character and get yeeted. I don't know. She's just fucking terrible. Definitely the worst operator in the game, for attackers and defenders. The only time I see Gridlock being a decent operator is during post-plant, where you can put one of her traps right underneath the diffuser, but the problem is you shouldn't be bringing operators that will help you in the post-plant. You want to be bringing operators that will help you get to the plant. So, already, by design, a flawed operator. If you ask me, they should honestly change it so it doesn't only take 1 bullet to destroy her traps, because only taking 1 bullet to destroy 1 instance of her trap seems kind of fucking lame. It's really bad. Like, if you even manage to catch Gridlock's gadget while it's deploying and shoot the center one before it has a chance to even deploy, then you can effectively just stop, you can just destroy her entire gadget right then and there if you're fast enough. I mean, even if you don't shoot the gadget yourself, you can use any sort of explosive such as impact nades or C4s to destroy it as well. So, I don't know, it's just fucking awful. They definitely need to make her traps a little bit tankier. At the very least, 2 shots per spike mat. And maybe make the initial spike mat, the one that spawns everything else, maybe make that way more tankier than it should be right now. And yeah, if they want to keep her as a 3 armor, she definitely needs way better weaponry. Like, buff the fuck out of the AUG or some shit, who cares? Like, right now it's so fucking shit that no one in their ever mind would even use it compared to the M249. Next up we have Knock. Definitely a B tier operator in my opinion. Reason being is that while she doesn't bring any utility to her team, she is designed to completely 100% counter all the intel operators on defense. Even the operators that do slightly do better against her, such as Mozzie and Echo, who have that white outline on their gadgets. The thing is that defense is so heavily reliant on cameras nowadays that having an operator that can completely avoid that will be 100% useful, because since you can no longer rely 100% on the cameras to spot where the attackers are at all times, you now always have the back of your mind that there's probably a nook somewhere in the map. The only real way you're going to detect her now is through traps that will still get her, and obviously barbed wire. She has to walk through barbed wire, then she has to at least make some noise. She is super strong, however, in lurker hunting, and the reason being is because her gadget also makes her basically the same level silent as Cav in Silent Step. Yeah, if as a defender you can barely hear your target, if you can't hear them at all, then suddenly there's a random nook that you ran into, and because she can hear you because she's not making any noise and you can't hear her, she's always going to have the advantage in those situations, and that's what's going to give her the edge when she's taking fights against other lurkers. Yeah, not too strong of an operator, to be honest. I don't think she'll get played that much in competitive, but definitely solid if the enemy just relies too much on those cameras. If she had an assault rifle and an ACOG, she'd definitely be a more powerful operator, like maybe even strong enough to be A tier, but because she is the first attacker to not have an assault rifle, she only has the FMG 9 SMG, which, while still a decent SMG, at the end of the day it is an SMG, and most of the other attacking roster, they all have at least an assault rifle that does a decent amount of damage no matter the fire rate. There are exceptions, obviously, as usual, but yeah. Last but not least, Lion. Yep, that's all I have to say.